To our February 22nd, 2019 oral history interview here at the Shrine of the Ages in Grand Canyon National Park. I'm Kristen Lukemeyer, and I'm a board member on the Grand Canyon Historical Society, and today I'm going to be interviewing Mary Shevlin Ochsenschlager. And I want to thank you guys for coming, and I especially want to thank Mary for agreeing to do this interview, especially since she agreed to do it exactly a week ago today, when someone else was not able to make it. So I'm really grateful that you're here, and that we're going to have a chance to talk today about your childhood and your teenage years here in Grand Canyon, and then efforts later on in your life to record some of the stories of your classmates here at Grand Canyon School.
Thank you, Kristen.
So
I'm happy to be here.
Thanks. Just to help us place you in time and space, I wonder if you would tell us when and where you were born.
Yes, I was born in Omaha, Nebraska in 1943. My father worked in the regional office in Omaha, and we moved to Grand Canyon in 1952.
I wanted to hear more about both of your parents because I know that they both worked for the National Park Service.
Sure.
So let's start talking about your mother, and I'll start just by asking you her name and what you know about where she grew up and the family she grew up in.
So her name is Catherine Farrell, and she grew up in a large family, went to graduated from Creighton University, and then was working in the Omaha office for the National Park Service. My father grew up in the Adirondacks of New York, and it was a pretty hard scrabble type farm. And he wasn't even able to graduate from high school until he was 22. He had to work and board in another town. And then he went to Syracuse University and got a general forester's degree in 1928 and worked in the private sector for a while. But then the CCC program was formed with the Depression. And one of his professors recommended him as a foreman type person for the CCC. So he began working with them. And I believe they must have been funded through the Department of Interior. And he worked on the East Coast between Maine and the Carolinas, just checking on CC camps, making sure they're set up right and things like that. And then he got transferred to Isle Royale National Park to set up CCC camps there. That's in Lake Superior up in Michigan. And he worked, and there's a recording of him. The Park Service did recordings of many of their employees. And that's a real interesting story of what he did there. Then he went back to the regional office, and a few years later was assigned as superintendent at Isle Royale. I was 3, and then when I was 9, we were transferred to Grand Canyon.
I want to go back to your mom for just a second because I know that she had a real attraction to the place where she grew up. Would you talk a little bit about her feelings toward the Nebraska landscape and the Platte River?
Well, I didn't actually hear her talking too much about that. She must have, her father was a big bird watcher, so she always showed us birds and enjoyed nature, but I really don't have too much information on that. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I couldn't even get her to remember the Dust Bowl. She was born in 1913, so she sure was adult when it happened.
Some things maybe are better forgotten. What was Isle Royale like for your family?
It's very remote and pure wilderness. There's no cars. You only get there by boat or seaplane. And we were, fortunately, 3 of us children at that time, and then 1 was born while we were there. There were 4 children in our family. We were our only playmates, but all I have is wonderful memories of total freedom. I mean, my mother knew some of the places we went on this little 1-mile island in the middle of Lake Superior. The main island was much larger, but Park Service headquarters were on 1-mile long island, a couple blocks wide. And we just went out in the day and picnic and with a sandwich, and the 3 of us went everywhere except to the main office because we were not allowed to go there and bother the working men.
So then your father came here to Grand Canyon in the early 1950s. What was his work here?
He was assistant superintendent, and as I became an adult and started coming back here, I realized I didn't know what he did. He was very careful not to talk about his work at home, and I think that was probably very wise because who knows who we would have told what he said. But I think he was assistant superintendent, which is now deputy. I assume they do almost the same thing. I don't think he had a lot of interaction with the tourists. I think it was dealing perhaps with facilities, personnel, things like that.
Would you talk about the one sort of recollection that you have of an encounter with a visitor to Grand Canyon?
Yes, one time he walked out. The office was on Center Road there. That was the main administration office. Probably most of you know where that is. It's a small building. I'm not sure what it's used for now. And he walked out of there once, just probably to go across the street to the store or something, and a tourist came up to him, and she had just gotten off the train and walked that way. I don't know why she got on that side of the train and saw the ditch there between the road and railroads, and she thought that was the Grand Canyon. And she was absolutely incensed. So that is one thing he brought home sometimes.
One of the projects that I was really taken by and hadn't seen a lot of documentation of was the Catholic Church project.
Okay.
What can you tell us about that?
I was in college, but I, heard some things, and this sometimes he did talk about. So there was a project for building homes over by the school. And with these federal projects, it's a large contract for many buildings, and they all are the same. And they're the same because so-and-so says their house has more than mine, and how come she has two covers mine? Those kinds of reasons. So it was very strict, and the money was exactly right. And so I don't know if he or other people in the community had arranged with the diocese to pay for a home for a Catholic priest. It always had, we were a mission parish. And so he was, I don't know if he was the project manager, he was dealing with this project. And we had a priest called Father Frankovic, who was a Polish man, and he was in charge. And he got his way. And he would go to the site where the men were building and tell them not to do that, and to do this, and I want this here, and I want this to be like this. And I thought my father was going to lose his mind. And he just couldn't get him to stay away, and he got his way. I don't know if there were ramifications of that, but so it finally was over, and it was built, and the priest moved in, and he brought geese and chickens and ducks and let them loose. That my father didn't just resign or kill himself at that point. So there may be more to the story, I don't know, but this much I know.
It sounds like your mom's Catholic faith was really important to her too, and I wonder if there are any other recollections that you have about the church here, either personal to you or about what role it played in the community.
Yes, and it's been an interesting thing for me to do interviews with other friends because I knew really nothing about the community church. I didn't know how the Mormons gathered and prayed, but we had this very small Catholic community, and the Burkamps and the Shires and Ellis's. Mr. Ellis was Mr. Shire was the main mechanic for the Park Service. Mr. Ellis was either an accountant or an engineer. He was some sort of professional position. There were just a few families, but we did all the things that we were supposed to do, and we had a lovely priest who was a real shepherd for us, even though he had handled Williams and occasionally some other places. We had Mass in that lobby building on the Bright Angel, where they now kind of have a museum, and they even are selling things there now. But that used to be a big sitting room for tourists. And then we would set it up as a church. We had a altar that folded up. And every Sunday, actually we had odd hours. Sometimes we were Sunday night, sometimes we were 5 in the morning on Sunday, and so he could get back to Williams. Sometimes we were Saturday night, but whatever, it was fine. And we were our own little tiny community. He would try to get us kids to sing. I remember being at Verkamps one time, and we just, I feel so bad because he was working so hard. He loved music, and we were being so silly. But it was a very nice little sub-community. And now I've learned in my interviews with other students at that time how rich their experiences were in their the community church and in the Mormon community. So it was all neat.
I know you said your dad didn't talk a lot as you were growing up and coming of age about his work, but I do wonder if you had a sense for what his National Park Service career meant to him or his feelings about his time at Grand Canyon.
Yes, he believed in the mission of the National Park Service, and he was very proud to be in the National Park Service. He had come out of the CCCs, and many men that age, in that time, came out of it, just moved almost seamlessly. Sometimes they didn't know who they were being paid by and who they were working for. It was so intertwined that I think that many of the leaders were the same. And he taught us, to be very respectful of plants and animals and the earth. It was the real mission for him, and he appreciated the uniqueness and the value of all the parks, and especially the ones he was involved in.
Before we talk more about your experiences here, I wanted to ask also about your mom. She was the wife of the deputy or the assistant, and then sometimes the acting superintendent. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you have any stories or recollections about what that role was like for her, or what her time at Grand Canyon National Park was like.
Yeah, she's the type that would get right involved in the community. She did her share of entertaining, but what she liked to do most in the places we lived was to explore them. So she took us down in the canyon as children a number of times. One time walking across from the north rim to the south rim. She took us to Supai and made sure that, the places we're talking about in this history with the trails that were not open at the time, we didn't go on those unkept, unmaintained trails or anything, but she made sure we experienced everything that we could at Grand Canyon and at Isle Royale. We would, lucky enough that when we first lived there, in the summer, my father would go to the North Rim for a month or so. And we just loved that. And I don't know why, I guess it was just that it was different, but it was just a wonderful experience. I think one of the things was there were so few people there, and the Park Service people, but the naturalist was there. And so sometimes he'd take us butterfly catching, or we could learn how to do the mounting, have experiences like that we really enjoyed.
Yeah, we don't have as much coverage of the North Room in these interviews, so can you say anything more about what you liked that there weren't as many people there, but how did you spend the rest of your days there? You guys were acting stuff.
Well, there must have been a couple of other children, I don't remember who they were, but we would play, endless games of trying to catch each other, tag, and go in the woods. We found there was between us, where we lived, which is the park area, and when you go into the park area, probably many of you have been there, there's 2 houses on either side of the road, and we lived in the one on this side, and it was 2-bedroom, and then there was forest behind us. Now it's very open, and it seemed forever to get down to where the campground was when I was young, but it's not that far, I found out when I'm adult. But there was a tree that you climbed to look for fire. What do they call those trees? They put ladders, lookout. Yeah.
Lookout.
Yeah. There was one in there, and we found it, and of course, right up to the top. That was thrilling. And then I was visiting my friend, Kim, I'm sorry, Kim, who works over there as an interpreter, and I found it, but it was fallen. But the ladder was still attached. It was neat.
It's a tree tower.
Yes.
Yeah.
They just took large trees and put ladders on them, and then they could watch for fires.
So I was thinking more about the sound when we were starting, but I wanted to point out that you moved to Grand Canyon National Park in 1952, and you were about 9 years old at that time.
Yes, I was.
And I wonder what your first impression of Grand Canyon was, or what you thought of this place.
When I was in about third grade in Michigan, I saw a picture in a book of a Navajo woman weaving, and I was just completely taken with that. And then when we were going to move to Arizona, I was so excited because it was in Arizona. And I loved the canyon. I recognized its awesomeness, but what I was really interested in were the Native Americans. And that hasn't changed to this day. Just fascinated by them. And then I found out they were wonderful athletes, they were wonderful artists, and I couldn't do any of that. So I wanted to be like them. I really envied them. And felt very grateful and blessed to make many friends.
You attended Grand Canyon School from later elementary school up until you graduated from high school. What are some of your strongest memories of Grand Canyon School?
Well, it was small. We were really pretty average, normal kids playing jacks and playground and things like that. One of my memories is of a wonderful teacher named Mr. Clark, and I was lucky enough to get him when I first moved there. And he made a difference in a lot of youngsters' lives. And I found that out in these recordings I've been making. But one time, this is the first year we were there, another person somebody I met told me that the Indians were not allowed to speak their language in school. And so I heard some in the bathroom. Well, busybody me, I must report this. I'm ashamed to admit it. And so I told Mr. Clark, and he was so kind to me, but he let me know very clearly that was not a bad thing, that was a good thing, and I didn't need to worry about that.
We were talking some too about one of the ways that you spent your spare time, which was in Girl Scouts.
Yes.
And I wanted to hear, and wanted others to hear about the leader of your Girl Scout troop.
Yes. There was a Girl Scout troop when I got here, and my sister and I joined right away. And our leader was a young woman who was a nurse at the hospital, single, and just one of these giving, community-minded people. And she took our Girl Scout troop on and led it. Her name was Ellen Goza. And so I wasn't present for what happened, but I heard the story. All these stories are told differently by different people, but here's her story. She was young and single, and the only real place for young single people to go for any entertainment was Rawell, the bar at Rawell, and it had a bowling alley. And there was this wrangler named Jay Goza, and he was hard-partying young guy. And so they were out there one night, and he had too much to drink, and he got a chip of wood and put it on his shoulder. He said, "I dare anybody but push that chip off my shoulder." So Ellen walked up, and that began the new story and so she had a boyfriend, and eventually they got married, and then when she got pregnant, she told us that she was going to be too busy. She was sorry not to be our leader. And that family turned out to be just such a gift to Grand Canyon. I knew they were a neat family, but I didn't know until I did these interviews of how much they did, how much they meant, especially Jay, who was the head wrangler, to the young men, the young teenagers in town. He was at every game. And then I would hear them tell me, "Oh, Jay invited me to do this," or "Jay goes and did that." he took one young man whose parents worked in, he had hired the parents to work at Fenner, and brought him into his home, a teenage boy. He had 2 toddlers, and his wife was pregnant. They lived on Avenue A, Apache Avenue, so you know how those guys are. Just the goodness of them. And so I knew he was a great guy. My youngest brother was killed in Vietnam, and my parents lived in Tucson at the time. He moved to Denver. He came all the way down to Tucson to go to that funeral. Just such a caring, giving, important community person, but just under the radar.
Something else that happened when you were a kid here was that Lowell Thomas came to visit and with a video project.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if you would introduce that. This is something that we were hoping to be able to show today, but it's a little challenging sometimes to go back and forth with equipment, so we're not able to, but this video that Mary's about to talk about is something that is in Grand Canyon National Park's museum collection. And so if after hearing her talk about it, it's something that you want to see, you're welcome to make an appointment with Kim or Colleen and go and view this. But Mary, would you tell us about the Lowell Thomas
it's
project?
a DVD. Well, he was doing the 7 wonders of the world. He'd been all over the world. And then came back to, actually had, I don't think, done much in the United States. So he came back and he decided to do Grand Canyon, and my father was probably in the position of being given the charge of helping him, facilitate him doing this, and he needed 7 children. So we had 4. And Preston Shevlin, who was our next door neighbor, and a little older than my sister and I, was the first person. If you see it, he's the first youngster that comes. My mother is having a picnic, and Lowell Thomas comes up and asks her what she thinks the 7 wonders of the world are. And she said, "Oh, that's easy." And then it goes to these 7 children coming kind of up out of the canyon. And so my family, and then the other 3 are Preston Shevlin and Vince Ellis, who once again I mentioned before, and then Sandy Letting. Her father was a outstanding ranger and did most of the photography from that era that the History Association, or the Department of History here has. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of a fun, just a little fun thing. It would have been fun. It's about a minute long, but it took us hours to find out we can't run it.
Yeah, you'll have to go and check that out if you have any interest. One other memory that you had that kind of makes me think of Chris Clark's presentation earlier to talk about is of a hike that you made with some friends on the Kaibab Trail.
When we went down in the canyon, we always came up the Kaibab. There was only one bridge, and you got across that bridge. I don't think these miles are quite right, but this is what it said. Grand Canyon, the South Rim, 7 miles, 11 miles. I'd already rocked a mile. I was hot. I'm not going 11 miles if I can go 7 miles. You just couldn't choose that. So we always came up the Kaibab, but this time, and I'd always wanted to go down a mule. My father said, "No, you've got 2 good legs. You do not need to go down a mule." And so I thought, there were 2 telephones at that time on that trail. And one was maybe a couple of miles from the top. I don't remember where it was, but I decided, I was so tired. And I knew he loved me. I'm going to call him, and I was just going to tell him, I'm not going another step. You have to send somebody down to get me. I just turned to, he was kind of a scary guy. You didn't really talk to him like that. So I must have been really tired. So finally that phone came into view, and it was broken. So I think I was disappointed, but also relieved. He wouldn't have come. And I made it.
So your father retired from the National Park Service in 1965, and I wondered what the rest of both your father and your mother's lives were like.
They retired to Tucson, and my father liked to play golf. And so that was great. And then my father was from the Adirondacks, so they would go back there for the summer. So it was a very nice retirement. I enjoyed that. Came through Illinois every time to see me.
And you had a career of your own, but before we get to that, I think one thing we wanted to talk about that was important to you and to other teenagers and young adults in Grand Canyon was summer employment.
Yes, jobs were a big deal. In fact, when you talk about what we did in school, it was sort of ordinary, but you know, the job you got, and we all either wanted a job or our parents wanted us to have a job. So you got a job. My first job was helping with the summer program when I was pretty, 14 or 15, the summer children's program. But then my next job was at Babbitt's, which was really a good place to work because you met everybody. Everybody came through the Babbitt's store, especially if you were a checker or at the fountain. Well, I got put in dry goods. But I had a really interesting experience there. One year, and Susie Burkamp, you might remember what year this was, there was the huge pinyon crop. Huge. And the Navajos just poured in from the reservation. And they camped out in the woods, and I think nobody paid any attention, I don't think, where they gathered, but there's plenty of Forest Service land there for them to camp in. In fact, I don't ever smell a campfire without thinking of this, because they came into the store a lot and it smelled like campfire, and it just has stuck with me. It was very exciting, and the women, the matrons at that time, still wore the velvet dresses and the velvet tops with the coins sewn on their sleeves. And so I was in dry goods, and this older Navajo woman, who I don't think spoke English, came over. And they're very stern. And she went like this. And I thought, well, so I reached down and I pulled out the first bra I got, and I said, this. She grabbed it, it might have been a 32A, I don't know. I couldn't get it back from her and try to talk to her about size. She simply bought it on the spot, and off she went. So that was a really fun experience. Then I worked at the newsstand at Bright Angel during the school year, but my best job was at the bird camps. And there I got mentored, and mentored in a subject I was interested in Indian arts and crafts. And I worked there all through my college years. I'm very grateful to have been able to do that. It was fun. And I had good bosses. Peggy Burkamp, their aunt, was a real mentor. And I look back and think I could have gotten a lot more if I hadn't been so self-centered. I could have learned a lot more from her. But I appreciate what she gave me. And she never complimented you if you didn't deserve it, but she did compliment you if you did, and that felt really good. And when she did that, it was a real boost to me. And I just love that job.
And you did continue with that interest in Indian arts, I think. So talk to us a little bit about your education and your career after you left.
Well, I did major in anthropology, but like my husband said, where are you going to work? I've got this wife with a college degree and can't get a job.
So
you have to get a doctor's degree if you want to work in it. But then I went to, I think a lot of people that are interested in archaeology and Native Americans and are interested in nature, and I really was. And I went back and got a master's in outdoor ed and spent 16 or 17 years teaching and managing land in Illinois. We don't have big pieces of land here. They have little pieces of it. You treasure a 30-acre piece, and prairies don't even come close. At Original Prairie, you might find 1 acre if you're lucky. So it's very, very precious there. But it was fun to do and work with. And I spent a lot of money on Native American pots and baskets. I have this wonderful husband who doesn't say anything.
Did it take a little bit of Grand Canyon country with you? I have just a few more questions related to your work with oral history in Grand Canyon, but before we get to those, I did want to offer you all a chance to ask Mary some questions if you have them. And I think I'll run the microphone so we can get it on the recording. Does anybody have any questions that you wanted to ask?
Mary?
Just a quick question. Did you ever get, did you ever get a chance to go down on a mule?
I finally did I took my husband and 2 older children in the 80s. It wasn't nearly as fun as I thought. It was kind of a disappointment.
Anybody else?
What is your favorite?
Hold on, we won't get you if you don't.
What is your favorite place to hike to? Your favorite trail or your favorite
I love
destination?
Supai. I love Supai. Supai.
Oh, Supai.
What makes that your favorite?
What?
What makes Supai your favorite? What do you love about it?
You know, I've always loved water. People love water. People like water. And when you live here, water's pretty scarce. So I was drawn to water, but I did go to Phantom Ranch when there was a pool. There was water in that pool, but it was so cold. We did go in it, but.
I know it's late in the day, so I'll just wrap up with those few more questions that I had for you. So you have conducted oral history interviews with many of your Grand Canyon school classes.
Yes.
And I wonder what inspired you to start that project.
So I heard about a project doing, I think that had to do with the school. And so I contacted the Park Service and asked if I could volunteer. And one of the reasons I did was I figured my friends and I would volunteer, but I didn't think any of my Native American friends would. So I started off with that in mind, but I quickly branched out to others, and I'm so glad I did because there are so many stories, so many wonderful families that had, you know, I mean, there's, you know, wonderful times and sad times that I was oblivious to. Everybody's story is so interesting. It's been fun to try to get railroad people, mine people, Fred Harvey people, contractors that come in and maybe stay just a year or two. Like I got somebody whose father worked on the pipeline. That was really interesting. Just all these different people, and ask them about how they felt about the community as a whole. And all of us felt like we were together in school. But then when I started thinking about who do you play with after school and on the weekends, it turned out it was mostly people who, it would be any place, who was in your neighborhood. And our neighborhoods were separate. We had Fred Harvey here and Railroad here and Park Service here. And so I don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea. But it was just something that occurred to me. At first I thought it was something negative, but I don't think so. I think it was just who's close by.
We talked about a couple of interviews that really stood out to you.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say more about a few of those folks?
Well, there's one man named David Beatty, who's a very interesting man. And he's bright and curious. And he had been given, for a number of reasons, a lot of freedom when he was young, right from early age. And he lived here from a very early age. And he lived at first right down by the cowboy dorm. And that is across from the mule barns. And so he was aware of all the mule activity, the wrangler activity, the powerhouse, the laundry, and he's electronically gifted. In fact, he invented the collars that go on the animals that people use for research that go up, send signals to what are they called?
Radio telemetry.
Yeah, he invented that. He invented it because a professor who was studying the Kaibab squirrel on the North Rim was having trouble keeping track. He would catch them and spray their tails so he could keep track of who's who, and it wasn't working. And he was so frustrated, and somebody told him to talk to Dave, and Dave developed something to put on him that helped him be able to figure out and find them and figure out which ones they were. And from then, David developed that into a business, and he has a business called Telonics. It's extremely successful in Mesa. And he told all about the details of every place, in all the buildings, all the workings of this. And it's hours and hours long. I've transcribed it all, but good reading, especially for individual places you might be interested in, like the Mule Barn or the Saddle Shop or the Powerhouse, those kinds of things. And he got around. He was brought the newspaper, curious, asking people questions. Somebody asks a question about what you do, you're delighted to share it. And so he was really an interesting study. And then another one was a guy that ended up being kind of the last real cowboy. He managed the second largest ranch in Arizona in Prescott for his, he had a college degree, and it was a very big job. But he worked at the general store when he was young in the butcher department. And when he went out on roundups and things like that, he said he used those skills over and over again to feed the men. He'd kill a cow, cut it up, cook it over the fire. He had stories of being a wrangler, interesting stories of what happened on the trail sometimes. Not a lot of them, but a number of them. And so that would be a fun book to read. But you find something interesting in any of them, and then, stuff you want to skip. I skip over. But none of them have been boring.
And that second person was Wayne Word.
Wayne Word.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just to wrap up, I wonder, as someone who has this real interest also in oral history and hearing people's accounts, has your work with that oral history project changed any of your thinking about your experiences at Grand Canyon? And if it has, how has it affected you?
It's made me realize, hopefully I was normal, because I was oblivious to all these other people having these life issues. For instance, several Native American families lost several children during that time, and I saw these children every day and didn't know brothers and sisters had died. But it makes me more tolerant of the adolescents in my family that I deal with now. They are self-centered, just as self-centered.
Mary, thank you so much for coming and doing this.
Thank you for asking me.
This has been the third really wonderful accounting, I think, of a very different side of Grand Canyon. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you guys all. Before you get up out of your chairs, I think Dave has an announcement to make. But I just want to thank Mary one more time